Welcome back to Echoes and Edges, the Broken and Beautiful podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Patria, the host for Echoes and Edges and the founder of the Broken and Beautiful Collective. We are a group of people on the hunt for beauty, meaning, and transformation, and I hope that this offers a little bit of that into your world. Let's jump back into the conversation. Talk or share your thoughts about the differences between like a survival adaptation and identity. And how do we begin to differentiate those things? Because survival adaptation feels so much like identity, at least initially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly there's a lot. There's a whole spectrum is what I think about, and I think for folks who have experienced, I would say good enough parenting through childhood. So there's enough responsiveness, enough attunement. They're going to have a greater chance of potentially developing a secure attachment. Now, that doesn't mean other things can't be influenced or, there's a lot of different things that can come with that. But certainly our childhood and some of those close relationships can make a huge difference in that. For other folks who've, maybe particularly in childhood trauma have, developed insecure attachments. And I won't go into all the different parts of insecure attachments, but essentially there's 3 others besides secure attachment. And they literally shift kind of based off of different categories with what we're experiencing, usually from our caregivers, though certainly other systems can make impacts. And this matters in part because we sort of come to know ourselves first through relationship. Before a child is aware of I have a self, we are in many ways first experienced through the eyes of our caregiver. It's like the way our caregivers are with us is beginning to form the internal templates, not just about our relationships outside of us and not just about God, but about ourselves.
Yeah.
And so these templates live in us. And in many ways, the goal of a healthy enough childhood, a good enough childhood, is that in adulthood, we sort of internalize a little bit of a good enough parent too. We have a little bit in it, and it often mirrors some of the experiences we've had in childhood where we've maybe been cared for when we were in pain. So that creates sort of a mirroring in our own body. Oh, when I'm hurting, I deserve care. When I'm hungry, I deserve food. When I feel lonely, I deserve companionship, right? You can see how it literally creates this mirrored experience, but instead of just experiencing it outside of ourselves, because certainly in adulthood, we need relationships too. It's just that we have more of a system inside of us that's more differentiated. And we sort of carry this around with us. And so when we're talking about survival adaptations, part of this in many ways is about the rupture to the creation of our own internalized secure base. And when we don't have that, oftentimes, and obviously not all trauma, there's such a big category here, but oftentimes relational trauma, especially in childhood, is at the root of these responses, these adaptations, these long-term things that start to look like personality. And so part of the work, and in many ways, this is where Try Softer really is my attempt to sort of give a framework. This is a framework to not just this one-time experience, but we're working with our bodies to begin to listen to when we are maybe acting outside of what's really congruent. And that's not always going to seem immediately obvious. It takes time and practice. Often if we are one of the people who's had to adapt by having lots of survival adaptations, which is part of my story, that we actually have to have people around us providing some safety and co-regulation, because what that does is it starts to rewrite the templates that we carry to help us repair, so that then we can actually offer that also to ourselves. And so really all of this is like almost like the things that happen before we address the question of what you're saying. Like, how do we parse out, is this survival or is this personality? And the other thing that I will just name, because we've kind of talked around this but haven't named it, is something like working with our nervous system. And your listeners might already be familiar, but with something I like to use the window of tolerance as a framework, and I use that quite a bit in Try Softer. That when we've experienced chronic disturbances, chronic unresolved, overwhelming experiences in our body, something called our window of tolerance, which is our realm, or our range of arousal, in which we can feel our feelings and we can feel like we are curious and creative and compassionate. That's where that's all available. And trauma tends to shrink our window. And what happens is it's easy for us to leave the window, and that's when we might go into different survival adaptations: fight, flight, fawning, so over accommodating, people pleasing, or potentially dropping down into like dissociation. We feel disconnected, we feel foggy, we feel depressed. And so part of that work is beginning to have enough safety so we can begin to learn, what do I feel like when I'm in my window? Who is the me that is in, like, and by that window, part of what's happening is that our full brain and body is online, right? And that's also, again, going back to the earlier part of our conversation, like that's when we tend to be most open to maybe God being with us. And we're the most innovative, and we're the most able to really even process difficult things. And so, as you can tell, there's a lot of scaffolding to this. There's a lot of pieces. And this is why this work is not easy, but it's possible. It's more than possible. And it's also why, paradoxically, gentleness and compassion, as much as we can. I know that for trauma survivors, that's not always our first thing we reach for. But as we're able, if we can be a little bit softer with ourselves, paradoxically, it actually makes it easier to be in that window.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful and poignant point. Because I think there's like you talk about the scaffolding, there's this period of preparation to try softer. You know, like in order to listen, to be able to take that in, something in me has had to slow down with attunement, with witness to some degree, with some safe enough experiences where then I can almost hear it. You know, where I maybe couldn't in the anxiety and the just hustling of survival, the adaptation.
Yeah.
So that's coming to my mind. And there is so much language out there that I don't argue with at all around the body knows, the body tells the truth, the body is right. Would you differentiate or just give your thoughts on that? Because yes, and this, right?
Yes.
That's the way I'm thinking about it. But I'd love your thoughts on that.
A statement like the body will tell us the truth, I believe that's true, and it needs context. And
Yes.
here's why. And it doesn't take away the reality that that's true. We just have to make sure that we understand why it's true, because otherwise it can get weaponized, and it can get weaponized in some ways that are really harmful to trauma survivors. And we don't want that, right? Because language has already often been weaponized. And so that's why we want to be mindful. So essentially, and we can use the window of tolerance as part of why this is how this connects. Essentially, when we've had unresolved trauma, typically, especially like chronic unresolved trauma, but it could also be like one big T trauma, like a PTSD experience. It could also be multiple experiences of relational trauma that's unresolved in our body. Both of those types of experiences can shrink that window, like we said, and there are some implications from that. And some of the implications are that our bodies and our nervous systems attempt to do its job to keep us safe can misperceive experiences that might be, for example, similar to something that was truly harmful. Maybe it's like a person looks like someone who was really abusive to you.
Yeah.
The fact that they look alike in and of itself, it doesn't mean that person is abusive, but your body, because of how trauma is stored in our body, that can activate, right? That that right amygdala goes, oh, we've done this before. And what's happening is that we lose, because our body does this to be really efficient in the face of possible danger. So when we perceive that there might be danger, we get very black and white. And part of the implications is that our brain has to react really quickly. And so if something feels similar to something else that has actually been harmful to us, at times we can misperceive it as being dangerous when it is not. Secondly, sometimes a situation is actually maybe in some ways not good for us. Maybe that person who looks like the person who abused you is not abusive, but they're not super nice. They're not necessarily someone who's going to be your friend, right? They haven't done anything abusive, but they're not warm.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to navigate past and present. In the present, there's some things we actually want to pay attention to. That person's maybe not someone that we want to invest in relationally. That's a real thing. And we are also experiencing something from the past that is also extremely amplified in that moment. So when we say your body doesn't lie, if we don't have context, we could automatically assume that being triggered by the person who reminds you of the abusive person means that that person is abusive. And that is a mismatch to that actual reality. Here's what is true. Here's what is true about your body is that we can believe that your body, your nervous system is having an experience. That's real. That is not a lie. And when we have enough safety to be in our window of tolerance, we can listen and we gain the capacity to bring the nuance. And we can say, oh, that person feels very familiar because of XYZ. And yep, I'm going to maybe need to work on that next week in therapy. That feels really present. And in the present, I need the skills to maybe that person still is someone that I don't want to spend a lot of time with, but we are going to treat that differently than someone who's been abusive, right? So that's where this is the potential danger of when we take things and we take it out of context and we slap it on like a Band-Aid and we think that's ultimate wisdom.
My goodness, that was so clear. And I do feel like that's a bit of a gap in some of the languaging that I see. So I feel so grateful. I feel like that is good. And I'm looking at the time. And so I want to just pause and say, thank you. I mean, thank you so much. I mean, again, as you have done through your published works, just your present conversation is filling gaps for me. So I just am so grateful to you for that, and for the work that as a fellow survivor, I can understand it takes, and it is worth it, and it is beautiful. You know, I was really struck by the Christmas lights story, and just the warmth of that, and the almost like just corrective experience with inside yourself where some things shifted. And I just want to tell you, Aundi, that I'm experiencing you that way, like that Christmas light. And I know that's a big deal. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful for your language and the work that you're doing in the world. Thank you for taking the time to sit with me today. Is there anything else that you would want to add, or just circle back to, or just drop in about the work you're doing now, or anything else that's important to you before we close?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for that. And I received those words, and I feel emotion hearing that. And it's so meaningful. And you're right. It is quite costly to do this work.
Yeah.
It is quite costly, and it is worth it. But thank you for acknowledging that. And I'm sure you have experienced that in your own, work too, that it requires something significant to be able to honor the truth of what you have lived through, and then to choose to re-engage it. So I received that. Thank you so much. And I am so grateful for our conversation and just how I experience you. And and I just would say for folks who are listening, I have some resources on my website, aundi if that feels helpful. It's too soon to announce, but I have a new book coming out next year. So I can't wait to start talking about that. Yes. I've been in the throes of editing, and I feel, just grateful and proud of that book. And I can't wait to get to share more in the coming months.
Oh my goodness. Well, I will have my eyes out for that. So thanks for giving us a little tidbit of new information. So that's really fun. So aundi Kolber.com, which you just, it's KOLB as in boy, ER, AUNDI, right? AundiKolber.com.
Yes. Yep. And if folks are on social media, you can find me same spelling as you just had, but on Instagram. And then I also am on Substack, and I've been taking a little bit of a break as I finish this book, but I'm hoping to spend more time there. So feel free to sign up for that too.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Echoes and Edges. If you're listening and you have just found this episode to be so full of important thoughts, please rewind, listen again, take notes. It is so worth really sitting with the words that Aundi offered us. They are not only learned and intelligent through her education process, but they are experienced. And you can feel that in Aundi's presence. And so please take all the time that you can to really take in her wisdom. I am so deeply grateful for Aundi's presence, her wisdom, and the gentleness that she carries into this work. I think what strikes me most about this conversation is the reminder that healing is not about becoming less human. It's about becoming more fully alive inside our humanity. It's about growing that window of tolerance, the capacity to live, the capacity to experience our own arousal our own sense of awe and wonder and beauty and connection. Today, we talked about trauma, survival adaptations, nervous systems, attachment, embodiment, incarnation, and faith, and what it means to slowly come home to ourselves after years of living in protection and survival. And through all of it, I hope what listeners heard most clearly is something like this. You are not failing because your body learned how to survive and adapt. Your nervous system isn't your enemy, and gentleness is not weakness. Healing often begins through force or performance, not through safe connection. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, it's just usually the first step. So as you learn to pay compassionate attention and you learn to stay present, and I'll include myself in that, as we learn to stay present to ourselves with increasing tenderness and honesty, that window of tolerance will grow. If today's conversation resonated with you, I highly encourage you to explore Aundi's work. You can find her books, Try Softer and Strong Like Water, wherever books are sold, and connect with her at aundi-kolber.com and on Instagram at Aundi Kolber. We'll link all of that in the show notes. And as always, if this episode was meaningful to you, I would so love it and be so grateful to you if you would subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might need a little more gentleness and hope in their healing journey. Until next time, be kind to yourself, especially the parts of you that have learned to survive before they ever learned to rest. You are not too much. You are not alone, and you are right on time.